The frozen moon of Zalera was silent, covered in endless sheets of ice that glittered under a pale sun. Deep beneath the surface, hidden in a forgotten facility, a team of alien researchers worked in secret. Their scanners had detected something strange buried under the ice, a large metallic pod that seemed older than their entire civilization. Inside the research lab, lights flickered softly as the alien scientists gathered around the chamber. Their leader, Commander Vreth, was tall and thin, his skin the color of molten silver. He looked at the strange object trapped in frost and said calmly, "This technology is not ours, nor any we have recorded." The others murmured in agreement. They were curious, but also afraid. The moment the ice was melted away, the markings on the pod became visible. Strange human symbols no one could understand. One of the assistants, a young alien named Karine, stepped closer and wiped the frost from a small glass window. She gasped as she saw a face inside. It was not an alien. It was a human. His body was motionless, his eyes closed, and a soft blue light glowed from the chamber walls. Karine whispered, "He looks peaceful." Commander Vreth frowned. "This must be a specimen from the ancient world they call Earth," he said. "Open it." With a hiss of pressure, the pod slowly began to open. Cold vapor escaped and filled the room. The researchers backed away as the light from inside grew brighter. The human's fingers twitched, his chest rose slightly, and for the first time in centuries, he took a breath. The entire laboratory went silent. The machines began to beep wildly, detecting energy surges that made no sense. Karine looked at the monitor and said nervously, "His vitals are rising fast, impossible speed." Commander Vreth's eyes widened. "Keep him restrained," he ordered, but before anyone could react, the man opened his eyes. They were glowing faint blue, reflecting the light of the chamber. His gaze was calm yet heavy, filled with something that made the alien step back without knowing why. The human looked around slowly, his voice deep and steady. "Where am I?" The aliens froze. None of them expected him to speak. Karine took a step forward, trembling but curious. "You are safe. We found you frozen beneath the ice. You were in cryo sleep," she said softly. The man looked down at his hands, his muscles tightening as he tried to remember. He could see flashes in his mind. Fire, explosions, stars burning, soldiers shouting, and then silence. The human whispered, "How long?" Karine hesitated. "We don't know. Your kind has been gone for thousands of years." The words struck him like a blade. Gone. The humans were gone. He remembered the last battle, the ships falling from the sky, the command to retreat, and then the pod, the sleep. He clenched his fists, his voice low. "Earth. What happened to Earth?" Vreth interrupted coldly. "Destroyed. Long ago. Your species was powerful but reckless. Your wars consumed your world." The man's jaw tightened. His heart felt heavy. He looked at the floor and muttered, "So they won." The aliens exchanged glances. The energy in the room grew thick, as if the air itself carried tension. Karine whispered, "Who won?" The human raised his head slowly, his expression calm, yet filled with sorrow. "The ones who feared us," he said. Suddenly the lights flickered, machines started to spark. The scanners detected energy readings from his body, strong enough to power the entire facility. The scientists panicked. "Restrain him," Vreth shouted. But before they could approach, the human looked up again. "Don't," he said quietly. His voice carried power, not anger, but warning. The guards froze in place, their weapons trembling in their hands. Karine could feel it. Something ancient, something unstoppable. The human stepped out of the pod, the metal floor echoing under his bare feet. He moved slowly, like someone remembering how to walk. The cold air swirled around him, and the frost on nearby walls melted as he passed. Karine whispered under her breath, "What are you?" The man paused, his eyes reflecting the blue glow of the chamber. "Human," he said, "and you woke me too soon." The alarms began to blare as the systems overloaded. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The human looked around, and then at Karine, who stood frozen near the control panel. He spoke again, softer this time. "Run." Before she could move, the power in the room surged. The entire facility trembled, lights flashing red. Commander Vreth shouted for containment. But it was too late. The ancient energy that slept inside the human had fully awakened. Karine saw him standing in the middle of the chaos, calm, steady, and surrounded by a faint aura of light. She felt no fear, only awe. The man who was once frozen for centuries was awake again. And in that moment, every alien in the facility realized a terrible truth. This was not a weak relic of a lost race. This was a survivor of humanity's final war. Something far more powerful than they had ever imagined had just opened its eyes. And the galaxy was about to remember why humans were once feared. The laboratory was in chaos, alarms still echoing faintly as smoke curled from the melted consoles. After the humans' awakening, the entire base was placed under emergency lockdown. Guards with plasma rifles surrounded the cryo chamber, though none dared step too close. The air was thick with tension and fear. Commander Zynth stood behind a reinforced glass panel, his eyes fixed on the figure now sitting quietly inside a containment cell. The human didn't move much. He just sat there with his hands resting on his knees, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. Even without trying, he radiated strength, the kind that couldn't be measured by any scanner. Karine watched silently from the observation deck, her heart still racing from what she had seen. The others whispered among themselves, calling him a relic, a weapon, or a ghost from the old wars. But to her, he looked alive, more alive than anyone she had ever seen. Zynth broke the silence. Begin the scans. The scientists obeyed nervously, activating beams of soft light that passed over the human's body. The data flashed across the monitors, but every reading came back distorted. Impossible, one scientist muttered. His cells are regenerating faster than light cycles. He's adapting to the atmosphere instantly. Zynth narrowed his eyes. Increase the energy field. I want to know what keeps him alive. Karine hesitated. Commander, maybe we shouldn't. Do it, he interrupted sharply. The energy field around the human began to hum louder, blue light filling the room. But the man didn't react. His heartbeat stayed steady, his eyes still closed. Then the lights flickered again, and every machine in the lab suddenly powered down. The human slowly opened his eyes, glowing faintly. Enough, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but every alien in the room heard it clearly. The containment glass cracked with a sharp sound. The lights above shattered, plunging the room into darkness. Karine gasped as sparks danced in the air. She could see his silhouette rising from the chair, calm, controlled. Power levels are dropping, shouted one technician. He's draining the energy field. Zynth cursed and slammed his hand on the console. Activate restraints. The mechanical arms inside the cell shot forward, clamping around the human's arms and chest. He looked down at the metal cuffs, sighed, and then flexed slightly. The metal screamed, bent, and shattered into dust. Karine's heart pounded. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. The human looked up at the glass window where the commander stood. You think I'm your experiment, he said slowly. But you don't even understand what I am. Zynth backed away from the window. He's dangerous. Sedate him, he shouted. A pair of drones flew forward, releasing clouds of tranquilizer gas into the cell. The human inhaled once, exhaled slowly, and the gas cleared away as if the air itself obeyed him. Karine stepped forward. Please stop. You're only making him angry. But the commander ignored her, barking orders to increase voltage through the containment grid. Blue lightning danced across the room, sparks flying everywhere. The human closed his eyes again, whispering to himself, still the same mistake. Then the power surged, and the room exploded in a burst of light. Every system failed. The alarms went silent, and when the glow faded, the human was standing outside the cell, free. No one saw him move. 1 second he was behind the glass. The next, standing before them. Karine's breath caught in her throat. His presence filled the room, calm but overwhelming. He looked around at the terrified aliens. You wake what you do not understand, he said softly. You break what you cannot control. His voice was not filled with rage, but with something far heavier, disappointment. Karine gathered her courage, stepping closer. Please, she said. You don't have to hurt anyone. The human turned to her, his expression softer than before. I don't want to, he replied. But they won't let me go. Before Zynth could give another command, the door panels burst open, smoke filling the corridor. Security drones rolled in, aiming plasma cannons at the human. Karine shouted, Wait. Don't shoot. But it was too late. Blinding flashes filled the room as plasma bolts struck his chest. The human staggered slightly, then looked down at the burns forming on his skin, only for them to heal instantly. The aliens froze in horror, their weapons useless. He walked forward slowly, grabbing the nearest drone and crushing it with one hand. Sparks flew as metal twisted apart. His voice echoed through the smoke, calm yet unyielding. "You've forgotten what humans were." Karine watched him disappear down the corridor, alarms blaring once more. She felt torn, her loyalty to her people, and her growing belief that this man wasn't their enemy, but something far greater. As the lights flickered back to life, Vreth turned to his crew. "Seal the exits," he shouted. "We cannot let him leave this facility." But deep inside, Karine knew the truth. There was no cage strong enough to hold him. The ancient human had awakened, not as a prisoner, but as a reminder. And the galaxy was about to remember why the name human once meant unstoppable. The human wandered through the dim corridors of the alien facility, his bare footsteps echoing faintly against the cold metallic floor. The lights flickered above him, trying to recover from the power surge he had caused. He walked slowly, every movement calm but deliberate, his expression unreadable, a mixture of confusion, grief, and quiet fury buried deep inside. Karine followed at a distance, her breathing shallow. She didn't know why she was following him, only that something in his eyes made her believe he wasn't a monster. She called softly, "Wait, please stop." The human didn't turn, but his voice came back to her, deep and steady. "You shouldn't be here." She hesitated. "They'll kill you if you keep running." He stopped walking and finally turned toward her, his glowing blue eyes softened a little. "They already tried," he said quietly. "Didn't work." She swallowed hard, trying to understand what she was seeing. The machine said he was human, yet his strength and energy defied logic. "What are you?" she asked. He looked past her for a moment, his eyes distant. "A soldier," he replied. "The last one." For a brief second, silence filled the hallway, broken only by the hum of damaged circuits. Then his memories began to surface again, not as dreams, but as living images flashing behind his eyes. He could see it all, the burning skies of Earth, the shattered moon, the endless fleets in orbit, humanity's final war. Karine could see the pain on his face. "What happened to your world?" she asked softly. The human closed his eyes, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself slowed. "They came to us," he said, his tone calm but heavy, "promising peace, offering alliance, but we learned too late what they wanted." He looked at his hands, remembering blood, explosions, and faces he could never forget. "They studied us, feared us, and when they couldn't control us, they burned our world." His words carried no anger, just a deep sorrow, a wound that had never healed. Karine's voice trembled. "You mean the Alliance, the Galactic Council?" He gave a small nod. "Different names, same kind." He took a slow breath. "We called them the Devourers, not because they ate worlds, but because they erased everything they feared." Karine felt her chest tighten. "And you were there," she whispered. The human's gaze hardened slightly. "I was made to be there," he said. "Project Helios, they called it. They built us to survive when others couldn't." He looked at the distant wall as though he could still see the battle. "We were faster, stronger, trained for wars that would never end. But in the end, even that wasn't enough. Humanity fell, one colony after another, until there was nothing left to protect." His hands clenched slowly. "They thought we all died." Karine stepped closer, her eyes wide. "Then why were you frozen?" He turned his head toward her. "Cryo sleep was our last command," he said. "We were told to sleep until someone found us, until humanity could rise again." Karine felt her throat tighten. "But no one came for you," she said softly. The human nodded once. "No one." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the corridor was the only sound. Karine could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on him. He had outlived his world, his people, everything he had ever known. Then, a faint noise broke the silence. Footsteps and metallic clicks from behind. Security drones. They were closing in again. Karine turned quickly. "They're coming." The human didn't move. He simply said, "Let them." The corridor lights flickered as the drones appeared, their red optics glowing. The lead unit shouted through the speakers, "Subject X, 09. Surrender or be neutralized. The human exhaled slowly. They still used the same words. Karine backed away. You can't fight them all, she cried. The human looked at her, and for a moment, there was a faint smile on his face, not of joy, but of quiet defiance. You'd be surprised. The drones fired, bright plasma bolts cutting through the air. The human raised his arm instinctively, and a wave of invisible energy rippled outward. The bolts stopped mid-air, suspended for a second before disintegrating into harmless light. Karine stared in disbelief. That's impossible. He looked at her with calm eyes. They made us to adapt, to evolve, to survive. The drones advanced. Again, but before they could reach him, the walls themselves began to shake. The power from his body pulsed through the facility like a heartbeat, lights exploding one by one. When the smoke cleared, the drones lay in pieces. The metal floor cracked beneath his feet. Karine stared at the destruction around them. What are you going to do now? She asked quietly. The human looked down the corridor toward the upper levels, where the stars shone faintly through reinforced glass. Find the truth, he said, and make them remember. Karine took a step forward. Remember what? He turned his gaze toward her, his voice steady and calm. What humans were, and what they should never have forgotten. And with that, he started walking again, leaving behind the ruins of the lab. Karine hesitated for only a moment before following him. She didn't know why, but something deep inside told her. This was only the beginning. Somewhere in the endless night of the galaxy, the last human had awakened from his sleep, carrying the memory of war. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the universe would soon remember fear. The upper levels of the facility were in chaos. Klaxons howled through the cold metal halls as red lights flashed across the ceilings. Security drones zipped through the corridors while armed alien soldiers shouted commands. The whole structure shook under the pressure of emergency lockdown. But deep inside the chaos, the human walked calmly through the storm. Karine followed close behind, trying to keep up. Her heart pounded with fear and adrenaline. The human didn't seem afraid, not even aware of the dozens of soldiers chasing them. His expression was calm, focused, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. They're closing the exits, she warned breathlessly. We'll be trapped. He looked at her with quiet certainty. Trapped is what they think, he said. His voice was low, almost emotionless, yet it carried a strange comfort. Karine glanced at his face. His eyes glowed faintly in the red light, not with anger, but with something deeper, something unshakable. They reached a heavy security gate sealed shut. Karine started typing commands into the console. It's locked by the commander's code, she said. I can't. Before she could finish, the human placed his hand on the panel. Sparks flew. The entire console lit up, and the door slid open with a hiss. Karine stared in disbelief. You just... How did you? He stepped through the doorway without answering. Old habit. He murmured. The corridor beyond was filled with mist and smoke, the scent of burning metal in the air. Above them, the automated voice repeated. Containment breach. Level 5 security alert. Soldiers were already gathering on the upper decks. Their boots thundered against the floor as they took positions, plasma rifles charged and ready. Vreth's voice echoed through the comm speakers. Subject X. 09. Surrender yourself. You are surrounded. The human paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. Always the same words, he whispered. They never change. Karine clutched his arm. If you fight them all, they'll destroy the facility. And you, he turned his head slightly, his tone calm. If they try, they'll destroy themselves. The first wave of soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, opening fire. The blasts illuminated the dark hallway with flashes of blue energy. Karine ducked for cover, but the human didn't move. The plasma struck him and scattered into harmless sparks before reaching his skin. He lifted one hand, and the air rippled like a wave of heat. The soldiers were thrown backward as if hit by an invisible force. Weapons clattered to the floor. Silence followed. Karine stared at him, unable to speak. You could kill them all, she said. Why didn't you? He looked at the fallen soldiers, still alive but unconscious. Because they don't know what they're fighting, he replied softly. They continued forward, deeper into the tunnels. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Karine led him through a maintenance passage she had once used to sneak out of the lab. This leads to the outer landing bays, she whispered. From there, we can reach the transport decks. As they moved, she finally asked, "Why are you helping me?" He said without looking at her. She hesitated. "Because I saw the way they looked at you," she said. "They were afraid, not of what you do, but of what you mean." He stopped for a moment, studying her face. "And what do I mean to you?" he asked. Karine hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe hope." Before he could respond, the wall behind them exploded, throwing both to the ground. Commander Vreth emerged from the smoke, his armor shining under the flashing lights. "You think you can walk out of here, creature?" he shouted. "You're not human anymore. You're a threat to the galaxy." The human rose to his feet slowly. "Then maybe the galaxy needs to remember what it fears," he said quietly. Vreth fired a plasma cannon directly at him. The beam struck the floor, blindingly bright. When the light faded, the human was still standing, unharmed, smoke rising around him. He stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate. "You don't understand," he said. "I didn't come to destroy. I came because you woke me." Vreth sneered. "And that was our mistake." He raised his weapon again, but before he could fire, the human moved faster than sight. A shockwave rippled through the corridor, throwing Vreth back into the wall. Karine ran to the human's side, grabbing his arm. "We have to go now," she pleaded. He looked at her, then at the unconscious commander, and finally nodded. Together they sprinted down the passage, alarms wailing louder than ever. At the end of the tunnel, a large hangar door opened, revealing the cold surface of Zalera. The storm outside raged violently, snow whipping across the barren landscape. Karine pulled a lever, lowering a small transport craft. As they climbed aboard, she looked at him one last time. "Where will you go?" she asked. He stared out at the endless stars above. "To find who survived," he said. "To remember why we fought." The engines roared to life, lifting the ship from the icy ground. The base below them burned in chaos. But as they rose into the night sky, Karine couldn't help but look at him in awe. The last human was free again, and his eyes burned with purpose. Somewhere among the stars, a forgotten war was about to be remembered, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had a reason to be afraid again. The small transport ship cut through the storm clouds like a silver streak, its engines leaving glowing trails in the dark sky of Zalera. Inside the cockpit, Karine sat beside the human, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled on the controls. The escape had been too close, too impossible, and yet, here they were, alive. The human stared silently out of the viewport, watching the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered orbit. His reflection flickered faintly against the glass. Calm eyes, weary face, and a quiet strength that seemed out of place in this new galaxy. "Where are we going?" Karine asked softly, breaking the silence. "Up," he said, "until we find answers." Once they reached open space, Karine activated the ship's navigation logs. "This database should have access to the galactic archive," she said. "If Earth was ever recorded, we'll find it here." She typed rapidly, her hands moving nervously, searching the countless digital maps of the known systems. But every time she entered Earth, or human, or Terran, the screen returned the same result. No data found. The human leaned forward slowly, his voice low. Again, she ran the search once more, same result. His hands tightened into fists. "They erased us," he said quietly. Karine looked at him, confused. "What do you mean erased?" He turned toward her, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Not forgotten, erased, deliberately." He walked to the back of the cabin and stared out at the void. "They didn't want anyone to remember humanity. They didn't want anyone to know what we were capable of." Karine frowned. "But why? What could they fear so much that they'd delete an entire species from history?" The human gave a small, humorless laugh. "The truth." He turned back toward her, his gaze heavy. "Once, humanity wasn't the strongest, but we were the most determined. We didn't stop. No matter how impossible things became, the galaxy saw that, and it terrified them." Karine leaned closer, her voice soft. "They thought you were extinct. They must have believed it was safer that way." He nodded slightly. "They built their peace on our ashes." For a while, silence filled the ship. The only sound was the soft hum of the engines. Then Karine hesitated before asking, "What will you do now?" He looked at the stars again, Find what's left, he said, and remind the galaxy what it buried. Karine opened another archive, bypassing security layers, and suddenly her screen flickered with hidden data. Files locked under Forbidden Species, Class Black. Her eyes widened. Wait, I found something, she said. It's encrypted, but it mentions Terran war protocols. The human leaned over her shoulder. Open it, he said. Karine's fingers danced across the holographic keys, bypassing lines of alien code. The file finally opened, displaying a document older than most civilizations in the current star charts. The text scrolled rapidly across the screen. A record of the war, the fall of Earth, and the creation of the Human Containment Act, which ordered the destruction of all surviving humans and the erasure of their name from galactic memory. Karine gasped. This was never shown to the public, she whispered. They lied to everyone. The human's expression darkened. Not lied, controlled, he said. They feared what we'd become, so they buried the truth. He turned away from the console, his voice quiet but strong. And now that I'm awake, they'll try to bury it again. Karine stared at him. Then what do we do? He met her eyes. We tell them. Every world, every system, every mind that's forgotten. We remind them who humanity was. She hesitated. If you do that, the council will come for you. They'll send fleets. He nodded. Let them. He moved toward the ship's control panel, inputting coordinates manually. Where are we going? Karine asked. He looked at her, a faint glimmer in his eyes. To the capital world, where the truth sleeps behind their golden walls. Karine's breath caught. That's suicide, she whispered. You can't walk into the council's heart. He gave a small smile. They said that once before. The ship's engines roared as they changed course, heading toward the distant light of the core worlds. Karine sat in silence, watching him, a lone survivor of a forgotten species heading straight into the center of the galaxy's greatest lie. And somewhere deep within her, a feeling grew, not fear, but faith. The human wasn't just fighting for revenge. He was fighting for memory, for the truth that had been buried under centuries of fear and silence. As the stars rushed past, Karine whispered to herself, They thought they erased your kind. The human looked out into the endless dark, his voice low but unyielding. You can erase history, but not what made it. The stars ahead burned brighter, as if the universe itself was listening. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the truth of humanity was on its way home. The core worlds gleamed like jewels against the blackness of space, towering cities of silver and light stretching across planets that had forgotten what war felt like. Peace banners floated above the council citadels, and the galaxy slept under the illusion of safety. But that peace was built on silence, and silence was about to break. The human ship drifted quietly into orbit above Voron Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council. Karine sat beside him, staring nervously at the giant orbital defense grid that encircled the planet. They'll detect us the moment we enter the atmosphere, she whispered. The human's calm voice answered. Good. He entered a series of commands into the console, overriding the ship's identification systems. You can't be serious, she said. This planet is where the council meets. The same council that erased your people. He looked at her, his tone steady. Exactly. The ship descended through the clouds, and the city came into view. Endless spires of glass, neon rivers of hovercrafts, and grand statues of alien leaders who called themselves saviors. At the center, the council tower rose higher than any structure in the galaxy, a monument to control and power. Karine's voice shook. If they find you, they'll kill you before you even speak. The human glanced out at the horizon. If they kill me, they'll prove I was right. They landed on the outskirts, near a freight terminal buzzing with patrols. The human stepped out first, the wind catching his coat, as if the world itself had been waiting for his return. Karine followed, clutching a small data drive, the file that contained the forbidden records of humanity's erasure. She whispered, Once we transmit this, the whole galaxy will see it. He nodded. Then they'll remember. But even as they moved toward the transmission hub, a shadow passed across the sky. A fleet of council gunships, their blue lights cutting through the night. The broadcast tower ahead glowed faintly in the dark, and between them and it stood an army. Attention, unidentified vessel crew. A voice boomed from the loudspeakers. Lay down your weapons and surrender. You are under arrest for possession of forbidden historical data. Kareen froze. They already know. The human smiled faintly. They always do. He stepped forward, unarmed, raising his hands. Soldiers surrounded him instantly, weapons drawn. Don't move, Terran. Their commander barked. The word hit Kareen like a shock. Terran, a name no one had spoken in centuries, so they still remember after all, the human said quietly. Without warning, one of the soldiers fired. The blast struck his chest, and the energy rippled harmlessly across his skin. The human turned his head slightly. Wrong choice, he said softly. The ground shook, light flared from his body, and a wave of kinetic energy rolled outward, throwing soldiers back like leaves in a storm. Kareen shielded her face as the air burned with raw power. When the light faded, the human stood alone among the wreckage, his aura pulsing faint blue. He looked up toward the sky, where more ships descended. They will keep coming, Kareen said. You can't fight them all. The human turned to her, his eyes glowing brighter. I don't have to, he said. I just need them to see. He handed her the data drive. Take it to the tower. Broadcast everything. If I don't make it, don't say that, she interrupted. You will, he smiled faintly. You've already seen what happens when humans don't give up. Kareen ran toward the tower as more troops surrounded the landing zone. The human faced them alone, explosions lighting the horizon. Plasma fire rained from the sky, but he moved like a shadow, precise, unstoppable, every strike echoing with centuries of buried fury. Inside the tower, Kareen reached the terminal, inserting the data drive. Her hands shook as she activated the transmission. Screens across the planet began to flicker, replacing news broadcasts and propaganda with the truth. Images of Earth, the war, and the extinction orders signed by the Council. Gasps and shouts filled the cities. Citizens of dozens of species watched in disbelief. The lie that had kept them obedient for centuries was unraveling before their eyes. Outside, the human was surrounded by fire and smoke, but he kept standing. His voice echoed through every broadcast, calm and powerful. We were never your monsters, he said. We were your mirror. You destroyed us because you feared what you saw. But humanity never dies. We endure. Kareen watched the message spread across systems, the signal reaching planets light years away. He did it, she whispered through tears. The Council's forces regrouped, their commanders screaming for containment. But it was too late. Every being in the galaxy now knew the truth. The myth of the lost humans had become a storm, and that storm had a face. The human turned toward the rising dawn, his body bruised, his eyes still burning with light. Behind him, the city was in chaos, and for the first time in generations, fear returned to the hearts of those who had ruled too long. Kareen's voice came through the calm, trembling but filled with pride. They see you now. He smiled faintly, looking up at the blazing sky. Good, he said quietly. Let them remember why. And across the galaxy, whispers began to spread again. Stories of the human who woke from cryo sleep, who faced the entire council alone, and with his truth, reminded the stars what courage looked like. The sky above Voron Prime burned with fire and light. Warships circled the atmosphere like predators, but none dared descend. On the surface, the city that once glittered with arrogance now stood silent. Its towering spires cracked, its streets empty except for smoke and scattered fragments of the battle that had ended hours ago. At the center of the ruins stood the human, motionless amid the wreckage. The faint blue glow from his eyes had dimmed, but the calm in his face remained. He had not come as a conqueror, yet victory hung around him like a storm that refused to fade. Kareen landed a small scout vessel nearby, her boots crunching over the glass and ash. Her voice trembled as she called out, "You're still alive." He turned toward her slowly, his tone soft, almost human again, for now. She approached carefully, looking around at the city that had been the symbol of galactic power. "They're afraid," she said. "Every world is broadcasting your message. Some are calling you savior, others, monster." He gave a faint, tired smile. "That's how it always starts." Kareen stepped closer. "They want to know who you are." The human looked up at the sky, where debris still drifted like falling stars. "I'm just a reminder," he said, "of what they tried to erase." In the distance, a transmission beacon flickered weakly. still sending his message across the galaxy. Planets once loyal to the Council had gone silent, fleets retreating, governments questioning everything they had believed. For the first time in centuries, fear was not born from control, but from conscience. Karine handed him a small holopad. "You should see this," she said. He activated it, and holograms appeared in the air. Messages from across the galaxy. Aliens speaking, some in anger, some in awe. One message stood out, a voice trembling. "If the humans lived once, maybe they can rise again." The human stared at the projection, his reflection flickering among the faces of countless species. "Rise again," he repeated softly. The words lingered in the air like an echo of destiny. Karine looked at him. "You could lead them," she said. "They'd follow you." He shook his head. "Humans don't lead by being followed," he said. "We lead by reminding others how to stand." The wind carried the scent of ozone and dust. The morning light fell upon him, painting his scars in gold. "So what will you do now?" Karine asked. He looked to the horizon where the dawn met the stars. "Find what's left," he said. There were colonies beyond the edge, outposts that went dark before the war. Maybe someone survived. Karine's eyes softened. "And if no one did?" she asked quietly. He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "Then I'll build again." She smiled faintly. "You really think one human can rebuild what an entire galaxy destroyed?" He met her gaze. "One human rebuilt fire," he said. "One wrote peace. One started war. One is always enough to begin." Above them, the remains of the Council fleet retreated into the void, leaving the world in uneasy silence. Across the stars, old powers began to fracture, new movements began to rise, and in every whisper, one word kept returning: human. Karine watched him step onto the ridge, the wind sweeping through his torn clothes. "You changed everything," she said softly. He looked back at her. "No," he replied. "I just reminded them what change feels like." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke, the human stood tall, a lone silhouette against the burning sky. Around him, the world began to stir, frightened, uncertain, but alive. Karine joined him at the edge of the cliff. "Do you think they'll ever stop fearing you?" she asked. He looked into the rising sun. "Maybe," he said. "But fear isn't the worst thing to feel, forgetting is." And with that, he turned toward the horizon, walking into the light, leaving behind the ruins of the old world and the seeds of a new one. The galaxy would tell his story for generations. The man who woke from cryo sleep, who faced an empire with nothing but his will, and who taught the stars that humanity was never truly gone. Because humans were not just a species, they were a promise. A promise that no matter how many centuries passed, no matter how many times the universe tried to forget, humanity would always rise again.